in our program on the modern novel. Today we will talk about early novelists and early novels, and we will take as an example Robinson Crusoe by Daniel Defoe. This is an example of the early novels that emerged. We talked about the background in the previous lectures, the development of prose, the emergence of a middle class, and so on. So today we will give an example of an early novel, and this is Robinson Crusoe by Daniel Defoe. First of all, some information about Daniel Defoe. He was born in 1660 in London. His mother and father, James and Mary Foe, were Presbyterian dissenters, which means they were opponents of the government. James Foe was a middle-class wax and candle merchant, so he manufactured and sold candles. He witnessed two of the great disasters of the 17th century, that's Daniel Defoe, two of the greatest disasters of the 17th century, a recurrence of the plague, a ta'un, and then the Great Fire of London in 1666. So Daniel Defoe witnessed both of these disasters. He was an excellent student, but as a Presbyterian, he was forbidden to attend Oxford or Cambridge, so he entered a dissenting institution called Morton Academy, the Morton Academy. Defoe developed a taste for travel, so he liked travel from a young age, that lasted throughout his life. His fiction reflects this interest. His characters, Moll Flanders, Robinson Crusoe, both changed their lives by traveling far from their native England. He became a successful merchant and married into a rich family, but his business failed later on, and he had money troubles for the rest of his life. So he was very successful in the beginning, but then his business failed and he had money troubles for the rest of his life. He worked as a merchant, a poet, a journalist, a politician, and even as a spy for the government, and wrote about 500 books and pamphlets. Notice that Daniel Defoe did not start writing novels, fictions, until he was 60, very late in his life. And throughout his life he wrote all sorts of other things, political pamphlets, journalism, reports, and things like that. He published his first novel, Robinson Crusoe, in 1719, when he was around 60 years old. The novel attracted a large middle-class readership. It was a hit. It was very successful. He followed in 1722, 3 years later, with Moll Flanders, the story of a tough, streetwise heroine whose fortune rises and falls dramatically. So both works straddle the border between journalism and fiction. So his writing sits somewhere between journalism and literature. Robinson Crusoe was based on the true story of a shipwrecked seaman named Alexander Selkirk. Right? This is the real story that happened to Alexander Selkirk, and was passed off as history. So, but we should pay attention. It doesn't mean that everything in Robinson Crusoe is true. It's based on a shipwreck, on a real event. But what Daniel Defoe did with the story itself is not true. So he changes a lot and he fictionalizes the story and the events. So you shouldn't read it thinking that this is real history. It focused on actual conditions of everyday life and avoidance of the courtly and heroic. Basically, Daniel Defoe made a departure in literature. Literature before that was focused on courtly life, on the life of the court and the palace and the prince and the king and the aristocrats. But Daniel Defoe departs from this tradition and focuses his fiction on the everyday condition, everyday life, and everyday life people. Uh, and this made Defoe a revolutionary in English literature and helped define the new genre of the novel. You should remember, this is the first baby steps of the novel. These are the first novels to be written. So Daniel Defoe here is making the first steps, laying the first foundations for the development of the novel. Stylistically, Defoe was a great innovator. He dispensed with the ornate style associated with the upper classes, and he used simple, direct, fact-based style of the middle classes, which became the new standard for the English novel. So he disposed with the flowery, complicated, complex literary style that was used before, and he was one of the first people who used direct, fact-based style of the middle classes, the average language that people spoke. With Robinson Crusoe's theme of solitary human experience, it's a story about somebody who gets shipwrecked in the middle of the ocean and ends up in a deserted island. So it's a solitary experience. Defoe paved the way for the central modern theme of alienation and isolation. What this means is that basically the idea of alienation and isolation will become a central theme in the modern novel. We find it even today in a lot of successful novels treat the topic of alienation and isolation. But when we look back, we find that Defoe was a pioneer, was one of the first people to propose the theme of alienation and isolation as a central theme. Defoe died in London on April 24th, 1731, of a fatal lethargy. This is the diagnosis that was written down for him by the doctors. We don't know what it means. It just says a fatal lethargy. And it's an unclear diagnosis that critics say may refer to a stroke or a heart attack. The plot summary. Let's talk about the plot of Robinson Crusoe a little bit. Crusoe sets on a sea voyage in August 1651 against the wishes of his parents, who want him to stay at home and pursue a career possibly as a lawyer. After a tumultuous journey that sees his ship wrecked in a storm, so his ship is destroyed in a storm, his love for the sea remains so strong that he sets out to sea again. He goes on another sea voyage again. This journey too ends in a disaster, and Robinson Crusoe becomes the slave of a Moor, the Moor meaning the Muslims in northwest Africa. He is captured and he becomes a slave. Is this true or not? We don't know. The story is fictionalized, so you have to expect that there is a certain element of imaginative creation in the story. Not all the information is true. This is a novel, it's a fiction. So he is shipwrecked for the second time. After 2 years as a slave, he manages to escape and is rescued and befriended by the captain of a Portuguese ship off the west coast of Africa. So he escapes, he's rescued by a Portuguese captain. The ship goes to Brazil, and there, with the help of the Portuguese captain, Crusoe becomes the owner of a slave plantation in Brazil. There were a lot of slave plantations. They farmed cotton or coffee or things like, or tobacco, and he became the owner of a slave plantation in Brazil. Years later, he joined other plantation owners in Brazil and went on a voyage, an expedition to Africa to buy slaves from Africa, because they needed slaves for their plantations. But again, he is shipwrecked in a storm about 40 miles out to sea on an island. which he calls the Island of Despair, on September 30th, 1659. His companions all die, save himself, so he's the only survivor of this shipwreck, of the storm, and 3 animals who survived the shipwreck: the captain's dog and 2 cats. Having overcome his despair, so he has despair in the beginning for like few days or months or weeks, but then he overcomes his despair, and he goes back to the ship, which is shipwrecked and still in the sea. So he goes to the ship and gets arms, tools and other supplies before the ship breaks down and sinks in the sea. So he proceeds to build a fenced-in habitation. He builds a house and surrounds it by a fence, and he builds it near a cave which he excavates himself. He keeps a calendar by making marks in a wooden cross which he has built. He hunts, he grows corn and rice and dries grapes and make raisins for the winter months. So basically he learns to survive alone on this empty island, by farming, by cooking, by growing corn, by preserving dried grapes and raisins and things like that. He learns to make pottery and he raises goats. All of this using tools created from stone and wood, which he harvests on the island. He also adopts a small parrot. He has a small parrot. He reads the Bible and becomes religious, so he thanks God for his fate, in which nothing is missing but a human society. So he survives, he manages to provide food for himself, he creates a shelter and a comfortable home, he has animals, he has everything he needs. So he becomes religious, he thanks God for saving him, he reads the Bible, and he says he thanks God because he has everything except a human society. Years later, he discovers native cannibals. These are cannibals, meaning that they eat people, they eat human flesh. Of course, again, the idea of fiction, we need to remember that this is fiction. Early English literature was interested in things that were strange and fantastic, like cannibals. And there a lot of early English novels talk about cannibals, but we need to remember that there hasn't been any evidence provided for that. There is no documented cannibalism that these English novels have provided. So this remains part of the fictional stories in search for the fantastic and the strange and so on. So at any rate, Crusoe finds cannibals. He discovers that there is native cannibals on the island who occasionally visit the island to kill and eat prisoners. They bring prisoners, they kill them, and they eat them. At first he plans to kill them, but he later realizes, because he has guns, he can kill them, but he realizes that he has no right to do so, because these cannibals do not knowingly commit a crime. They don't know that this is wrong. This is what they grow up doing, and they feel that it's normal and natural, so they don't know it's wrong, and therefore Crusoe feels that he has no right to kill them. He dreams of obtaining 1 or 2 servants by freeing some prisoners. When a prisoner manages to escape, Crusoe helps him. He helps one of these prisoners, and he gives him the name of Friday. The day, he names him after the day Friday. After the day of the week he appeared. Crusoe then teaches him English and converts him to Christianity. After another party of natives arrive to again partake in a cannibal feast, Crusoe and Friday manage to kill most of the natives, most of the cannibals, and save two of the prisoners. One is Friday's father, and the other is a Spaniard, who informs Crusoe that there are other Spaniards who are shipwrecked also on the mainland, not on the island, but on the mainland. So they devise a plan, they put a plan together wherein the Spaniard would return with Friday's father to the mainland and bring back the other prisoners. They build a ship and sail to a nearby Spanish port. Before the Spaniards return, an English ship appears, but it has a mutiny. A mutiny is a revolt against the captain. And the mutineers have, have taken control of the ship and intend to maroon their former captain on the island. Crusoe and the ship's captain strike a deal in which he helps the captain and the loyal sailors to him to retake the ship from the mutineers, whereupon they intend to leave the worst of the mutineers on the island. Before they leave for England, Crusoe shows the former mutineers how he lived on the island and states that there will be more men coming. So he shows them how they can survive on the island, and they leave them on the island, and he goes with the English ship and the English captain. Crusoe leaves the island December 19th, 1686, and arrives in England on June 11th, 1687. He learns that his family believed that he was dead, that there was nothing in his father's will for him. He didn't leave him anything because he thought he was dead. Crusoe departs for Lisbon. He leaves for Lisbon to reclaim the profits of his estate in Brazil, because remember, he had a slave plantation in Brazil which has granted him a large amount of wealth, so he has a lot of money now. In conclusion, he takes his wealth overland to England to avoid traveling at sea, because he has so much money and he doesn't want to travel by sea because it's dangerous, so he goes overland. Friday comes with him, his friend Friday, and along the way they have one last adventure together as they fight off hundreds of famished wolves. They're hungry wolves that try to eat them while they cross the Pyrenees mountains. So this is a short introduction to one of the early novelists and one of the earliest novels, Daniel Defoe and Robinson Crusoe. I hope you find it enjoyable, and we will talk more about it in our next lecture. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa ta'ala wa barakatuh.